Welcome to Human Resources and Writing. I'm going to have each of us introduce ourselves before we get started. I'm Christine Coon, and I work here in Human Resources at GRCC. I work as a generalist, so I do a lot of HR functions with a lot of different groups, and part of that responsibility is recruiting and going through the interview process and selection process. So that's why we're here talking about the selection process today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Koch. I also work in human resources here at the college. I have the same job that Christine does. I am also a generalist. We work with different employee groups. So I do a lot of the same HR functions that Christine does, and that is including the recruiting, interviewing, and hiring process as well. So we're here to give you some of our knowledge today, so we're hoping this is a really interactive process. We're going to be going through a presentation ourselves, but then we also want you to have the chance to ask us a lot of questions. So start thinking about what some of those questions might be.
And I'm Jessica Behrens with Human Resources. I'm the Associate Director. Previously, I held a generalist role, so I have also had my fair share of experience reviewing resumes and going through selection process. And I help Laura and Christine out on searches currently that we have going on. So again, we're all here to go through resumes and answer any questions that you have.
All right, well, with that, did everybody get a copy of the handouts that I had at the front? Yes? Okay. So we have done lots of screening and reviewing resumes and helping decide who's going to get an interview and who is not. So I'm going to actually put that responsibility on you right now. So take a few minutes and read the two resumes that we handed out. And we're going to talk about who you're going to hire or who you're going to interview and why.
All right, everyone have an opportunity to look at both of the resumes. So before we get started, can I see by a show of hands, how many of you have created your own resume, cover letter and resume? Okay, so that's really helpful for us because if you notice as you were reviewing both of the resumes, a lot of similarities, right? And we're going to talk today about some of those key pieces to the cover letter and the resume, and some of the information that you should be including. And so I'm going to hand it over to Christine to kind of get us started with looking and comparing both of those resumes.
Thanks. All right, so by a show of hands, who would invite Melissa forward for an interview? You would? Why?
Because you're going through so many different resumes, and so the way that they word their professional experience and stuff, it's short and sweet and to the point, whereas the other one is kind of wordy.
Good point. Thank you. All right, so then I'm assuming by the one person that wanted Melissa, the rest of you are thinking maybe John would be invited forward for an interview? Yeah? Show of hands? Yeah. Everybody else? Great. Why? Why John? He provided a lot of information. That's good.
Yeah, like what she said, he gave a lot of good explanations, and when it came to his resume, yeah, it was a bit wordy, but he kept it to the point. He didn't leave any experiences out that would be useful in the workforce.
Yeah. So what he wrote was relevant to the job that he's applying to, assuming that, he did that well, because you guys don't have a job description to look at, right? Why else?
We have one over here, Christine.
Oh.
He didn't put partygrill@email.com.
I'm always excited when people see or catch that email address. So everything's appropriate on his resume and cover letter, right? So it's work appropriate. That's something that people sometimes forget to change or create maybe a professional email address for applying for jobs. Great. Any other reasons?
He was more detailed in his qualifications. For example, under the professional experience, she put down that she prepared tax returns. He was more detailed by saying he prepared federal and state tax returns.
Great. Detail does matter because you're trying to demonstrate your experience, right, on the resume. Good.
He signed his cover letter.
He signed his cover letter. Good catch. Even though it's just a different font, it looks like a signature. So that attempt is there. I think that that's good. Anything else before we move on? The point of this exercise is that this is the same exact person. So I took the same person's resume and I kept the expanded one for John and I condensed Melissa's. So it's the same person with the same experience. It's just a matter of how well it was communicated on a piece of paper and how important it is to communicate well on this piece of paper, because this is your first opportunity for someone to meet you if you're looking for a job at that organization. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Laura, and she'll probably refer to but she's going to talk about the cover letter portion and might refer to these cover letters as well.
So Christine had mentioned that this is your first opportunity to explain to the employer or the person that's looking at your resume and your cover letter to tell them why you're the best person for this position. And that's the purpose of what a cover letter is to introduce yourself and to explain your experiences. So you'll notice that there's a cover letter and there's also a resume. For John's, his was more descriptive with his cover letter. So he went into more depth with the experiences that he had and would align it better with the position. So the first thing that you want to do when you're thinking about starting to write a cover letter is to think about what the employer is looking for in a candidate. And how do you think that you would go about doing that? Any thoughts?
Research the position.
Perfect. So research the position is a good point. You could do that on the company's website, but also researching the position with just the job posting that they have. So the job description that they post that you're applying to. So one of the things that I personally do when I'm thinking about writing a cover letter or a resume is print out the job description and highlight some of those key points. You're going to be wanting to look for those key points that the employer is looking for in a candidate. Those will be listed in the job description. Sometimes they're tucked a little bit into the essential functions of the job, but you're able to find that when you really start to look at all of those responsibilities that the job has. So as you go through and you're highlighting those responsibilities, that can help you think through the experiences that you have had in previous jobs, that you've had in your classes, that you've had in group projects, whatever it might be. You can think through it that way. And that will help you start to write your cover letter. And you'll want to address all of those pieces that they're looking for in a candidate through what you have highlighted on that job description. You can get that in the responsibilities or essential functions portion, which is generally going to be on the top of a job description. Or you can also get it in the education and skills requirements. So make sure you look at the whole job description to see what they're looking for in a candidate. So that's kind of the first step of starting to think about how you want to write your cover letter. And then the way you go about putting that information into your cover letter is through your writing. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is your writing and how you're conveying the information and your experiences to the employer. Some extra tips that I have for cover letters too. One, when you are finalizing your cover letter, read it out loud to yourself. It's one of the best ways to find grammatical errors, to see spelling errors. You'll often get caught up if you have two thes in a sentence and Word didn't catch it. You'll often get caught up when you're talking out loud to those errors. So it's really important. It sounds funny and it sounds silly, but to read it out loud to yourself. And that's a good tip for any type of writing that you're doing, an email, an essay that you're writing for a class, whatever it might be. It's a good way to catch some of those errors. If there are errors on your resume and cover letter, you could very easily be weaned out. So it's really important to make sure that there's accuracy in your cover letter and your resume as well. Trying to think of some other tips. Oh, with the job description, I had mentioned some of those essential pieces of the job description when you're writing your cover letter. I have seen where some individuals have put the essential functions or what the employer is looking for in a grid. And so they organized their requirements with on one side, and then they organized how they met those requirements on the other side. So that's an easy way when you have HR professionals or managers that are looking at resume and cover letter one after another to really catch their eye and show that you're meeting all of those requirements that they have. All right, did I miss anything?
I think I'd like to add, so the resume is your opportunity to share your qualifications, your experience. The cover letter is really your opportunity to show your excitement, your enthusiasm for that particular position. That's where you can kind of show a little bit of yourself, is in the cover letter. So don't be scared to do that. If there are multiple components to a position, one of which is analyzing data, for example. Put that in the cover letter. I see from the responsibilities, there's analyzing data. I'm really excited about this work. If you have experience only in your coursework, but not in a professional capacity, put that in your cover letter. I'm really excited about this work. I have a lot of experience when it comes to coursework, and I'm eager to learn more in a professional setting. So again, it's that opportunity for you to kind of show a little bit more of yourself.
I do want to also mention one thing. I did mention reading your cover letter out loud to yourself, reading through your resume out loud to yourself, but rely on others to help you with that too. There are services here at the college that can help assist you with resumes and cover letters, and you can work through student employment for that. But also a friend or a family member or a colleague or whoever you might trust to give you their honest feedback would be a really good person to read through that for you as well. When you're reading it 20 times over, you might not catch something that someone else would.
And the only thing that I would add to what they've already said is your cover letter is also an opportunity to discuss any of those things that you know employers might have questions about. So say you took a break in your career, you had a job, and then you took a break to go to school, and you weren't working while you were going to school, your cover letter is a good opportunity to just answer that question. You'll see a gap in my employment history. I did take some time to go back to school full-time to earn my degree in whatever degree that you're earning. So that's a good place to explain those types of situations. And we see that often when we're going through resume and cover letters with parents that may be re-entering the workforce. They explain that they were home with children, for example, for a while, and that's why there was no employment history during that time.
So I'll transition over into the resume portion now. Unless you have any questions about the cover letter, we'll give you some time at the end to answer any of the questions that you have. But anything so far? Okay. So cover letter or resumes, again, they're an opportunity to share your qualifications and your experience in a professional setting. I can't emphasize this enough that you really need to try and write it so that there aren't assumptions. It's clear that you are looking at it from the lens of, will the person reviewing this have any questions about the information that's included? And a lot of you commented that John's resume was clear in that he provided not only, performed the tax-related research, but what topics did he have experience in? So giving a little bit more information about the experience that you have. A lot of times you'll see on job postings, they're asking for a specific amount of experience. So we're looking for someone with 2 to 3 years of customer service. being as clear as possible when it comes to those little details in writing your resume. So, for example, having your title of customer service representative, but not having the length of time that you had that employment opportunity. That will raise a red flag to the reviewer, questioning, why did they not include how long they'd worked at that employment opportunity? Maybe it wasn't as long as we're asking for in our job posting, versus, no real reason why, you just didn't put it in there. It's important, again, to include all of those little details so that that person reviewing the resume isn't asking those questions. So you'll see on John's, he has the dates. So he was the staff accountant for 2006 to present. Okay, so now I know how much experience he has in that position. To go a little further, I appreciate seeing the month as well when it comes to years of experience, especially if we're looking for someone with fewer years of experience. Let's say it's 1 to 2 years. Really being able to identify, if we were looking for someone with 2 years of experience in a tax accountant role, and John's only listed 2006 without the months, it's hard for us to interpret exactly how much time he was in that role. Does that make sense? So those little details, I know that they seem maybe a little nitpicky, but they really are going to help the reviewer as they're looking through each one of those resumes. A question comes up quite a bit. There's not an objective on either of these resumes. And I think if you have an objective on your resume, and it's really, really good, that's great. But oftentimes objectives kind of get us into a little sticky situation, especially if information is not correct. So you copy your resume from one job posting to another job posting. That one happens to be full-time, the last one was part-time, and your objective says that I'm wishing to obtain customer service in a full-time or part-time position, and it's not accurate information ultimately. It sends a red flag, especially when looking at positions that are going to be responsible for being detail-oriented or accuracy or things like that. That's your first opportunity to show that detail. It's on, okay. It just seems like you're louder than I am, so. And then John's does have some additional items on there with regards to proficiency. This is really helpful, especially in positions where there aren't a number of years of experience, just that you have experience or knowledge, and your experience or knowledge is based off of coursework or proficiencies. It's not necessarily on the job experience. So you're still demonstrating that you have knowledge in this area within that proficiency or knowledge type of section. I don't know. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
One thing I do want to add is I know that Jessica said keep the person that's reviewing the information in mind, have a lens that they're going to be looking at your resume. Make it as easy as possible to find the information that we need to have to decide whether you would meet the requirements or not for the position. If you make it very difficult for the reviewers to find whether you have the education or whether you have the experience, your resume may get skipped over. If it takes too much time for us to look into that information, and some companies will be going through hundreds of resumes for one position. If it's taking too much time to find that information, it's not showing that you're very clear and concise in your communication.
And if you look at the two resumes, you'll see that John indicated when his degree was awarded. I'll say that we see this all the time. People will put dates in which they intended their college or university, but we don't know if a degree was awarded. So by putting something like awarded, or a transcript will say conferred or attained, any of those words telling us that you actually have that degree is really important, so that we know that you have the credential that we're requiring. If you have any anticipated date, that is another thing to add. So anticipated graduation in 2018 works as well. So we know that you may not have it now, but you're very close to attaining that degree at that point. And one thing that wasn't mentioned necessarily in the cover letter part, but probably pertains more to that, is make sure that you address it to the right company. Oftentimes, I will see resumes and cover letters come through for Grand Valley State College or Grand Valley Community College or something along those lines, where it's the incorrect name of the company. And I will tell you that that is one thing that committees just don't like to see here at the college, and it really does put the person at a disadvantage for moving forward in the process. So make sure that's accurate when you're submitting your documents.
Something else that goes in line with the cover letter item that Christine just talked about is you might not be able to use the same cover letter for every job that you're applying for. So you may be applying for 10 different jobs, and you might have to write 10 very different cover letters. So just make sure you're spending the time to put in the effort to write those cover letters for those jobs. I know it's a lot of work for you, but it really is important, and it gets noticed on the side of those that are looking at your information. Oh, and also follow directions. So if an employer is asking you very specifically to write a cover letter, generally you're going to find that on the bottom of a job description after all of the information about the position and requirements. If they're asking you to write a cover letter, submit a cover letter and a resume in the same document. That will be very important to follow those rules that they're setting for you. Oftentimes, for our positions, we do require cover letters and resumes, and we don't see cover letters. And some committees have a hard time with that. That doesn't necessarily mean we wean those candidates out directly. We still look at their resumes, we still look at their experience, but it gets noticed that they didn't see that important piece that we were requiring. Also, when you're submitting your resumes and cover letters, I actually recommend one document. It looks nicer. For our system, the system that we use, it's easier for us to find a document if it's all in one as well. We don't have to go to as many locations, which could potentially be one of the reasons that employers are looking for you to do it in one. But also, it just looks more professional, it looks nicer, and save it in a PDF document. PDF documents are really important. Your version of Word, or if you're using a different system, may not be the same that the employer is using. And so if you're using Word and you're submitting it in Word, it might not come out the exact same. So it's really important to put it into PDF. It can't be edited, which is also very nice. And also, the layout comes out exactly as you intended it to be.
So those are our tips for resume, cover letter writing. What questions do you have for us? We know you have questions.
If when applying for a job it says preferred that you have these, can you still is it still a good idea to apply if you don't have those qualifications? Do they still look at you and consider you?
I would say yes. I think all three of us would say we always encourage you to apply if you feel like it's a position that you're interested in. Preferred, I think you do have a little bit more flexibility too. So that again is maybe where the cover letter comes in, explaining, I don't necessarily have all of this experience, but here's what I'm, completing some coursework towards that preferred item. But yes, I would say always encourage those to apply if they're interested in those positions. What other questions? Yeah.
I
I've always wondered about the to whom it may concern address for cover letters. I think I was taught to try to find out who would actually be reading it, but then I know there's usually many, many people reading these. So is it a good idea to try to find a name to address it to, or just is to whom it may concern acceptable? Or does it not really matter?
I mean, I might have a little bit of a different response than Christine or Laura. I don't have a preference. I'm not really looking at that too much. I think if you're going to put a person, make sure that you're spelling their name right and you have the right title, if you're going to be that specific.
And make sure it's the right person as well.
Yeah. You could also use hiring manager. You could address it to a hiring manager if you know that they work on committees. So in higher education, we work on committees a lot. It's expected that a committee is going to be reviewing. So you could say to the screening committee or to the hiring committee. But I don't get very caught up in who people address it to, unless it's blatantly wrong. Then, there's some concern. Or the person doesn't even work at the institution. Then that's another, they didn't edit the resume for this particular position.
Would there be anything you should leave out, or if you worked part-time and you don't want to add it, or should you I don't know,
leave out? If it leaves a gap in your employment, I wouldn't probably leave it out. You don't necessarily have to expand on it. You could just show that you were employed at that point in time. So I'm trying to think of how, I think actually in John's, he had two different professional experience and then employment, where he just put grounds crew and then Grand Valley State University and then the time that he did that. So he didn't say what he did in that job, but that he was employed during that time, which is, I think, good information. I remember when I was graduating from my undergrad degree and I was working with career services, I asked a similar question. I had retail type of experience, and the career, I forget what they are, career counselors at that point said that you should put it on there because if you work in retail, it's showing that you have to be somewhat well kept and put together, and it shows responsibility. So there's some value to being employed. So if you just put that basic information down, I think that's not going to hurt you. The rule of thumb is to go back 10 years. Unless you guys have other things to add.
I think something to add to what Christine was saying, she had mentioned her experience in retail. If she was applying for a customer service experience, that would show that she has experience likely working with customers that might have had complaints. So she has experience working through some of those situations. Also just general customer service experience. So even if you don't list what you did on there, just the basics of what we understand for that field, we would kind of assume that you have that customer service experience.
Same goes for restaurant industry. I think that I see that often on resumes, and in general, committees will look at that as a positive experience because of the customer service when we're looking for those types of positions. So even if it's not necessarily an office position and we're hiring for an office position, some of those skills are transferable between different industries. A question that we haven't heard, and maybe I'll ask you guys. Does your resume have to be one page, or can it be more than one page?
Your resume can be more than one page. My personal recommendation, and just because I like to look at very clean documents, is to have full pages. So if you have one page that's full, that's great. If you have a second page, my recommendation is to fill it if possible. Don't make any information up, but fill it if possible. So if you don't have coursework on there and you're a recent graduate or you're looking to graduate, that's something you can add on there. You can add volunteer experience. If you're comfortable with it, you could add references. But as you can have as many pages as you need to get the information across to those that are reviewing your resume. Of course, make it clear and concise. Don't write it in paragraphs. But if you have a lot of experience, 2 pages is perfectly fine if that's how far you have to go to explain what your experience is. You do. Is there a okay? Do you want me to ask it? Yeah. Okay. Is there a preferred format? Is that what?
Is there a specific format, or does he just put all on there?
Yeah. So the question that we have is there a specific format recommendation that we have as professionals that are looking at resumes? My personal opinion, I really like the way that John's is laid out. It's easy for me as a reviewer to find education. It's easy for me to find experience. It's easy for me to find leadership experience and achievements. Any layout will work, honestly. Just make it easy and clear to see. A lot of people ask about colors, using colors on resumes. That's perfectly fine as long as it's not your font that you're using that for. My recommendation is to stick with a normal black font. But I have seen colorful resumes. I will add one more piece. Please do not put pictures on your resume. That is a legal concern from our aspect. We don't want to make any hiring decisions, and we don't want any type of biases to come in the process where we're reviewing resumes or throughout the entire interview process. So my recommendation, if you've been thinking about putting a picture on your resume, is to leave that off.
Is there a typical number for references, like 2 or 3 or no more than 4? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think I know for us, when we are asking for letters of recommendation, we like to have up to 3. If you're listing references on the bottom portion of your resume, just like their name and contact information, I would say 3 is a good number to start with. You know, there's always those situations where you may not be able to contact for whatever reason, 1 or 2 of the references. So it gives you a good number so that you can ensure that you're connecting with at least a couple of them.
And with references, make sure that they're professional in some nature. We have a difficult time talking to friends about as references. So if you can find instructors that you have good relationships with, or you've taken several classes with, we would consider that. If you haven't, and we have had people that they hadn't had employment before, and so it's hard to find a reference that could verify how you would work. So we would have people that were involved in church activities, for example, as references. So you can find people, as long as they know they're not a friend or a family member, and they know a little bit about you and your dependability, or can speak to how you'd be as an employee. That's what we're looking for with references.
And if you're going to add somebody as a reference on your resume, please make sure you have the conversation with them first to make sure they'd be willing to be a reference for you. You wouldn't want to have an employer contact your reference didn't know that you were looking for another job, if it's a current supervisor or whoever it might be. Just make sure you have those conversations with them. If you're concerned about a company contacting your references before letting you know, we don't do that here. We always let our candidates know if we're going to be contacting a reference, but there may be employers that would contact them without reaching out to you first. Don't put them on your resume if you're concerned with having them reach out to your contacts. But just make sure you have that conversation with them, be upfront with them, make sure they're willing to be that reference, and then if they're okay with it, you can put their information on your resume.
When it comes to references, do you put down, obviously their numbers and their emails? Do you put down their address where they worked or where you met them, like the university or the company's name?
So my recommendation is, if it's somebody that you have worked with, is to put their name, their title, and the company that they work with. And then you can also put, if they were your supervisor, your direct supervisor, if they were just a colleague on there, you could put that too. You do want to put their phone number and their email address. I wouldn't worry about the address, though.
I mentioned it earlier, but the John John's resume, it has under the professional experience, there's like 11 bullet points, and those bullet points intrude on the section where the dates are. Would you prefer having more information, like more bullet points and kind of the sloppy format in that sense? Or would you prefer them to shorten down what they have to say about the position?
I'm going to ask you a clarifying question, if that's okay. So you're looking at the bullet points in
yeah.
the middle?
It goes
Or coming over to the right? Okay. That's a good observation. I would not recommend decreasing the information on those bullets to make it look like those numbers are on their own. I think they're easy enough to find. What you could do in this example is move over those dates further to the right. You can see that there's some room with the line that goes across to the right, and you could shift those over a little bit, and they'll stick out even more. I wouldn't reduce the information that you have on that if it's necessary to get your experience across. Does that answer it? Okay.
I have a couple questions. The first one, are references on a resume like necessary? Really? I mean, I have a lot of information I want to say.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think it's necessary unless the company asks specifically for you to put it on the resume. You're generally, when you're applying for a position, and if you come in for an interview, there's going to be an application process as well, and they're usually going to ask for your resume or your references at that point. So if you don't have the additional room on your resume to put the references, you don't need to worry about that. You could, if they're asking you to put references, you could put references upon request. But if they're asking very specifically for you to add those, I'd make sure you do that. Okay?
And then my next question is about the application. Is it acceptable to put see attached resume or to copy things off of your resume and just put it in the spot on the application, like on the online application?
That's a good question.
Our process is a little bit different in that you actually upload your cover letter and your resume. So we are actually encourage, if you're applying to the college, to have that all ready to go when you sit down and log in for the first time to apply online. But I do know that there are other organizations that have different sections for the education, the experience, and I think that that's perfectly acceptable. I would just encourage you to ensure that the formatting is is correct, because a lot of times when you copy and paste things to a text box, you get the weird upside down question marks and things like that. So I think that that's perfectly acceptable to take it right from your cover letter or your resume.
Do you have another question? Nope. Okay. All right.
Something to note with the application process too is that all has to be very factual information. So, and I would also encourage your resume to be very factual, but that's a legal document that they could use in employment decisions. So you have to make sure that you're being very forthright on that process. So, yeah. Another tip that I like to tell people when we do these workshops is if you're saving your document, it'd be really nice if you would save it with like your last name, comma, first name, and then the title of the job that you're applying to, because when we download them, then it comes through with your name on it, so we don't have to resave it with your name and open it and do that. So it saves us a little bit of time. So HR professionals would appreciate if you did that. It's just kind of a little plug for for us to save time, but it shows some consideration on your part as well. So.
And attention to detail.
We have a few more minutes, so we have time for more questions if you have them. We have a quiet group. You guys are hungry. It's time to go to lunch.
What are some ways that students who are just graduating can make themselves stand out when you're reading stacks of hundreds of resumes? So maybe some red flags and some things that we should strive to include.
I think that the cover letter is definitely going to be important. Again, showing your your excitement and your eagerness to get in and learn and grow in your in your new career. And so again, pulling in from like Christine said, we want this to be all factual, right? But you can emphasize some of those things that you may not have professional experience, but you did gain experience in your college career. So, were you on committees? Were you part of student organizations? All of those experiences are beneficial when you're, entering into your career. I always am a big advocate for interns in general, so I know that that's not necessarily related to cover letters and resumes, but that's where you can gain a lot of exposures and internship opportunities too. So.
I think the point we were trying to get across is this is your first, again, opportunity to introduce yourself to an employer. So your writing really does matter, and the details really do matter. So make sure you really take time to apply for jobs in the right way, and you're sitting and you're being very considerate about how you're expressing yourself in your cover letter and resume. Good? I don't really know how I feel about GPAs. I think if it's like a 3.25 or higher, maybe, I guess it's worth noting because that would be in the A- level. So I think you could put it. How about
I think my personal opinion for our positions in general, I don't think it has a lot of weight on our decision to have your GPA, but potentially for another employer, it might. So maybe try to get some information about the employer and what's important to them. If they have something in the job description that kind of leans to it being important to have that information in there, and your GPA is that 3.25 or higher, go ahead and put it in there. It's not going to hurt you to have it. Unless it's a 1 point something, then you probably wouldn't want to put it in there, but that 3 point something, it would be appropriate to put in there. But personal opinion from our hiring experiences, GPAs don't have a lot of weight in my experience with the position I've had, but talk to some of the colleagues if you have some friends that work at that company, or if your parents' friends work at the company, or whoever it might be. See if they've been on a hiring committee before for that company, and was that something that they put a lot of weight into?
Well, thank you for attending. I know that many of you are getting credit for being here in your classes, so if you need us to sign anything, we'll be up here to sign your forms. But we appreciate your time today. Have a good afternoon.
I also want to add, if anybody has some pressing questions that they didn't want to ask on the microphone, please feel free to come up and ask us too, okay? Thank you.